Hello, I'm Katie Dartford and welcome to Toulouse. This time I'll be exploring the 4 different departments of Tarn, Gers, Tarn-et-Garonne and the Haute-Garonne in the south of France.
So we've just arrived at Toulouse Airport in the Midi Pyrenees and we're going to head off for about an hour to the town of Auch to discover the origins of Armagnac. We will be travelling to the capital of the region, but our first stop is Auch in Gers, which is about a 1-hour drive west of Toulouse and the birthplace of the legendary D'Artagnan. As I arrived at Armagnac de Lourdes, I was excited to see many elegant bottles of Armagnac, with blends ranging from 3 to more than 30 years old, as well as some vintages from the 1900s to now. The distillery is a small family business run by 2 brothers who are still upholding 4 generations of family tradition of Armagnac making.
It has to be French oak, but it doesn't have to necessarily be the pedunculate wide-grained oak. And they can toast the barrels either with a heavy toasting, a medium or a light toasting. Each one will depend on the producer and what this sort of eventual Armagnac he wants to have.
I'm going to show you upstairs, the paradise.
The paradise. I wonder what that could be. Well, apparently it's where the oldest vintages are stored in glass jars or bonbons to keep them away from the light. The walls of the cellars are black due to humidity and evaporation and a mushroom that feeds on the fumes. After the Armagnac grapes are vinified, they're distilled and stored in cellars containing over 1,000 barrels and a dozen oak tanks to age and protect the Armagnac. It was then time to go and see exactly how the Armagnac was bottled and labelled. The whole bottling process, the labelling, wax sealing and gold embossing of these wonderful de Lourdes Armagnacs are done by hand by a team of 2 or 3, and it's much harder than it looks to get the wax seal not to dribble all over the bottle.
Fredo can do the stem and the cork for you, or you can do it yourself.
Of course, I wanted to do it myself. I doubt I'll ever get a chance to try it again in a hurry.
Sur le poussin. Et allez-y.
And now we stamp it with my seal.
À droite, à gauche. Non, c'est bon.
Ah,
Ok.
there we go.
Wow, natural, very pretty.
My own sealed bottle of Armagnac.
De Lourdes is one of the only Armagnac houses to use 2 methods of distillation, the continuous and double distillation method. After distillation, the liquid is put into toasted oak barrels to give it its colour. It has to be French oak, and the finished products are blended to give different flavours.
So which one's that?
Baco grape, 100% Baco grape on one of the different types. From last year's, you can see already the colour that it's got.
Yeah. It's very nice.
Start with it down here, quite low down, rather than going, and then you
Yeah.
can really appreciate the aromas, the perfume. So this is the Uni Blanc, and that's the Baco.
During the aging process, they lose 2% of liquid a year, which they call the angel share. This amounts to about 20 barrels a year.
It's very nice.
I then made my way to Auch to check out the historic cathedral and to see what else it might have in store. The first stone of the UNESCO-registered cathedral was laid in July 1489, but the cathedral was only consecrated around 60 years later, but even then it wasn't completely finished. That happened almost 2 centuries later, with its classical facade dating from the 16th and 17th centuries.
This is the Cathedral of Sainte Marie in Auch. It's one of the last Gothic cathedrals built in Europe. Inside it's Gothic and outside it's Renaissance. Inside there are 3 treasures: its great 17th century organ, which is said to be one of the finest in the world for playing Baroque music, its 113 Renaissance choir stalls of carved oak, these feature more than 1,500 biblical characters, and the 18 Renaissance stained glass windows by Arnaud de Mol. There's also an 18th century archbishop's palace with a 14th century tower adjoining the cathedral. I'd heard that outside the cathedral was just as beautiful as inside, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Being in the south of France, it naturally had a vineyard. There was even a statue dedicated to my childhood hero, D'Artagnan. Arriving at the picturesque Le Breuhaus guest house, I was greeted with a beautiful view of the Gers countryside. Helene and Jean have 5 south-facing guest rooms inside the 18th century farmhouse, and mine was located in one of its 2 towers, with a walk-in shower and a king-size bed and charming countryside-style furniture. I woke bright and early to see the sun peeping through the trees. The guest house looked even more spectacular in the daylight, but I was excited to hit the road again and see more of the region. After breakfast, of course. My next destination was the 12th century Abbey de Flaran. Located in the north of Gers, the complex is a perfect illustration of Cistercian art in Gascony that had been reworked until the 18th century. This is the Abbey de Flaran, and it's one of the best preserved monasteries in the southwest of France. We've been hearing how the monks here would pray 8 times a day, and they'd have to wait for a candle to melt in the middle of the night. When it finally melted, they'd have to get up at 2 a.m. and start to pray. The monastery also houses some of the best examples of 16th to 20th century art.
From mid-September to Lent, they ate at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then before Easter, 40 days Lent. They were very slim.
Was it sort of almost part of the religion, like to be a little bit hungry all the time?
Yeah, it's part of the rule. Because if your mind is busy with your stomach, you can't meditate.
During the 13th century, the abbey grew fast, but has since been in danger of being destroyed many times due to various wars. So these are the very steps the monks would walk down 8 times a day, and they'd go and sit there to pray for half an hour. In the 1970s, part of the abbey burnt down, but after being classified as a historical monument in 1914, it was saved and bought by the Department of Gers in 1972. As I reflected on what I'd been told about the monastery, I began to imagine how different their lives must have been to mine today. There was just enough time to quickly check out the Simonov art collection housed in the abbey. It contains an exceptional collection of masterpieces from the 16th to the 20th century, from the likes of Cézanne, Renoir, Matisse, Picasso, Monet and Rubens. My next stop was one of the many vineyards in the region. Château Bellevue-la-Forêt is 30 kilometres north of Toulouse and one of the largest single privately owned wine estates in the southwest of France. The unique Negrette grape is used to produce the red and rosé Château Bellevue-la-Forêt under the Fronton appellation. But the best way to get around the 100 hectares of vineyards in the region is not by car, but by horse. So here we are in the domain of Fronton. It's about 30 minutes from Toulouse, and we're just exploring the vineyards around the region. One of the best ways to do this is on horseback, or you can also do it on a quad bike or on cycle. As we picked up some speed in the home straight, my next destination would also involve animals, but not quite in the same way. France is by far the largest producer and consumer of foie gras, with 30,000 people working in the French foie gras industry. The farm was created in 1982, and owner Christine Laboutou shows us how she prepares the duck liver for a variety of their delicious products. All the ducks are reared in open-air Gascon farms for 14 weeks, then force-fed whole corn for 12 days. I then got a chance to taste the liver before and after it was cooked. It seems fitting that after my duck lunch to take to a river cruise along the Canal de Deux Mers, or the Canal of the Two Seas in the Tarn-et-Garonne region.
Et l'assassin de service qui n'a pas du tout l'air méchant, qui a plutôt l'œil intéressant, coupable ou non coupable, s'il doit se mettre à table, que j'aimerais qu'il vienne pour se mettre à la mienne.
The canal is a very particular experience to make in Tarn-et-Garonne, because you can have holidays and peaceful and slow experience, because you can go fast on the canal. It's limited for the boats, or you can go cycling, but just to cross a lock it takes more than 30 minutes, so you have to be very patient.
Dans la rubrique du vice, il y a l'assassin de service qui n'a pas du tout l'air méchant, qui a plutôt l'œil intéressant, coupable ou non coupable, s'il doit se mettre à table, que j'aimerais qu'il vienne pour se mettre à la mienne. Si la photo est bonne, il est bien de sa personne.
Depending on the weather, you can also cycle beside the canal, which links the Atlantic and the Mediterranean seas. We don't go quite that far, just a cruise from Mozac to Castel-Sarrazin. You can't help relaxing as you wait for the locks to fill and drain as you move slowly along the 23-kilometre stretch.
Qu'avait le cœur trop généreux, moi qui suis femme de président, j'en ai pas moins de cœur pour autant.
I was then off to my accommodation for the night, Le Manoir de Saint-Jean, around 9 kilometres from Mozac. The 19th century house is decked out in a neo-classical style and is surrounded by a beautiful park with century-old trees.
Rien qu'un tout petit bout, tranquille recroquevillé, un qui se fout de tout au milieu de mes clés.
We're even shown how to make a dessert from the previous night, a sort of upside-down cake featuring the local Châtelas grape.
Si je le sens, le perce d'aiguille lui jette des sorts, me rendras-tu le reste?
The next morning we hit the road early as there was lots in store.
Quand je rentre à la maison, elle me dit souvent que j'ai une tête d'enterrement. Et elle a raison, je travaille au cimetière, c'est incontestable. Je laisse ma tête au vestiaire et je me mets à table. Faut pas se laisser abattre, j'ai une faim de loup. Moi je mange comme 4 et je bois comme un trou. Puis je retourne au cimetière, travailler de mon mieux, digérer mon pot de bière et mon croque-monsieur. Pendant l'oraison du prêtre.
We've arrived in the department of Tarn, and behind me you can see the town of Cours-sur-Ciel. That's one of the plus beaux villes in France. From here you can see why it got its name. Until 1993 it was called Cordes, thought to mean rocky heights or a reference to Corboda in Spain, famous then for its leather craft. That year it was renamed Cours-sur-Ciel due to its height above the clouds, a good place to watch for attacks. Built in the early 13th century by the Count of Toulouse, the town is considered to be one of the first of the bastides, or fortified towns in southwest France. Merchants who became wealthy through trade in leather and cloth built sumptuous houses from the late 13th century with ostentatious facades demonstrating the wealth of the owners. In the 15th century it was pillaged as part of the 100 Years' War, but because they built their homes within the original 13th century ramparts, they escaped heavy damage during the religious wars at the end of the 16th century. Now it's classified as one of the Grand Sites Midi Pyrenees. So we're here on the south side of the town. We've just walked up a street named Rue Chaude, which means the hot street, which is actually a literal translation because the sun is always on it. And it used to be where the poor used to live to keep them separate from the rich people who lived higher up in the city. As I explored the rest of the town, I could see many examples of Gothic architecture as it evolved over the 13th and 14th centuries, lining the main road. It was then on to Château de Sours, about 50 kilometres northeast of Toulouse. Owned by the Jeunesse de Sours family, who'd lived in the area since the 14th century, the estate is centred on the chateau, built in the mid-19th century. Most of the wines produced at the Château de Sours are red and sold through the family's group of restaurants in Paris and Geneva, and all the wines after 2012 are also organic.
On aurait juré qu'elle cuisinait pour une armée, sitôt que le réveil sonnait. Moi, j'étais au lit, dans la chambre du haut, réveillé par les bruits d'assiettes et les odeurs de veau. C'était la journée qui commençait, petit français. Mon grand-père enfilait son paletot.
It was then time for my favourite part, the wine tasting.
Pantoufles et ses sabots.
Which wine is your most popular?
It's a red wine. It's called La Réserve Eliezer. Eliezer is the name of a great-grandfather, and it's wine really famous. People like it because it stays in oak for 1 year, and it's a blend of 4 different grapes, and it's one that we can keep many years, and it will improve with the years, and it's one of our most famous red.
What's your newest, most modern?
This one is the newest.
Sparkling rosé.
Sparkling rosé.
My favourite.
It's extra dry. It's between brut and sec. It's really nice. It's really fresh and fruity and really easy to drink.
Ah.
You have to try.
I should try.
Les commerçants du bled passaient en camionnette.
The final night of my adventure was spent at the stunning Domaine de Perche, a small boutique hotel set in the heart of the Golden Triangle of Albi, Cours-sur-Ciel and Galac. The renovated white stone 18th century wine chateau is decked out in classic and contemporary decor and is a wonderful place to relax and unwind, with a lily pond and terraces and a swimming pool overlooking 4 hectares of parkland. The highlight was aperitifs in the west courtyard, and dinner cooked every day from fresh, seasonal and mainly locally sourced produce, and of course some exceptional local wines. Cheers! It was the last day of my time in France, and before I headed to Toulouse airport I took the opportunity to look around the city, known for its unique architecture of pinkish terracotta bricks, which earned it the nickname La Ville Rose. The city was founded on the trade in pastel dye between the mid-15th and 16th centuries, so I had to check out some of the shops featuring it. I then headed for the famous Victor Hugo market, that's home to some of the best quality produce in the area. Over 100 stalls featuring fish, charcuterie, fruit and vegetables, and also some items that could be more of an acquired taste, and certainly not something for vegetarians. I wanted to find out a little bit more about what makes this city so special, so I talked to Laura Bowler, who's a local tour guide.
So you grew up in Toulouse, but you've got English parents, and you've travelled and everything like that, and you went to university here, but you choose to stay here. Now,
Yes.
why is that? It must be quite a special place.
Well, it is special, and most of my friends, quite a few of my close friends who I grew up with and went to high school with, went off to live in Australia, to Canada. So, some go to the UK, and I go to the UK to see my family. But I guess one thing that means to me, like, the reason I should live here is because my parents left the UK and met here and stayed here. So I think it must be nicer, I don't know. But also, no, it's the atmosphere. It's very friendly. In the south of France especially, people like to be outside, even with the rain, but especially when it's nice, and it's usually nice, and just have a drink outside and walk and enjoy the view.
Unfortunately, my time in France had come to an end, and I headed for home.
So I had a really great time in Toulouse, and I think I'll definitely be back sometime soon. Back to the UK now.